With Metroid Prime 4 finally here, I started wondering how long would it actually take to beat every Metroid game. Not speedrunning, not following a guide, just playing like a normal person. For each game, I'm using 3 time ranges. A first time playthrough where you get lost and miss things, a more experienced run with us wandering, dying, and just mostly knowing what to do, and then a completionist run where you do absolutely everything the game has to offer. I'll talk about Prime 4 at the end, and that section is based purely on research since I haven't played it yet. There's going to be no spoilers, and all these numbers are rough averages. It doesn't mean you can't beat these games slower or faster. Released in '86 for the NES, this game defined the template for exploration-based platformers that would eventually become known as Metroidvanias, but playing it today can be quite a challenge, especially for newcomers because there's no in-game map, no real guidance, and the world of Zebes is full of repeated tile sets that make everything feel disorienting. That alone could add hours to a first-time playthrough. For most newcomers, Metroid can take anywhere from between 6 to 10 hours to finish, and this is one of the biggest ranges I have in the video. A lot of that time is spent wandering around, trying to remember where doors are that require missiles, or which areas are now accessible with a new item. There's a good chance you'll forget where a specific elevator is, or accidentally loop through Brainstorm multiple times while looking for the next path forward. Without a guide, progress often comes down to bombing every block in sight until something gives way. The pacing improves once you get core upgrades like the Morph Ball, bombs, high jump boots, Ice Beam. The Ice Beam in particular really changes how you move through the game, letting you freeze enemies to reach higher places. But the game never teaches you that, so a new player might go a while without even realizing how useful it is. There's also the infamous infinite bomb jump trick, which isn't required but can open up shortcuts if you manage to master it. A lot of the boss fights here can be pretty difficult, and newer players will likely need multiple attempts. And that's not even mentioning how the game respawns you with only 30 energy after dying, which is going to add a lot more time. Experienced players who know where to go and what to skip can cut their time down a couple hours. The game doesn't track item completion, but many players consider a 100% run to be collecting every missile pack, energy tank, and upgrade. That usually lands in like the 4 to 5 hour range. And that will be the only time in this video where the average 100% completion rate time is lower than just the main playthrough rate. And that's because if someone's 100% completing this game, they probably already know what to do, so it makes sense in my research why I would show this. Personally, I've never come close to 100%ing this game, so I can't speak on personal experience for that, but I can tell you that as someone who did not grow up with this game and played it a lot later, it took me probably 7 or 8 hours to beat it. Metroid 2 shrinks the formula of the original down to fit the Game Boy, which affects the pacing in some good ways and some really rough ways. You explore SR388 with one clear objective: eliminate 39 Metroids, and that structure gives the game a sense of forward momentum, but the lack of a map and the lack of the Game Boy's limited visual detail makes getting lost just a constant issue here. For first-time players, expect a runtime around 4 hours, maybe 5. The biggest problem is how similar many areas look. Tunnels blend together, rooms repeat, and it's easy to forget which sections you've already cleared. New areas only open after killing a certain number of Metroids, and you can end up backtracking for 30 minutes just to realize you missed one enemy somewhere. Unless you're using a guide, a lot of time is spent wandering just like the original. Once you unlock movement upgrades like the space jump and spider ball, things do speed up a bit. The spider ball lets you cling to walls and ceilings, which is great for traversal and secret hunting, but it also slows down the game in practice. You end up crawling everywhere just in case there's a hidden tunnel you missed. With almost no direction from the game itself, it's easy to fall into just a slow, methodical search pattern. Boss encounters aren't especially difficult early on, since most Metroids are just stronger versions of the same enemy, but Gamma and Zeta Metroids start to feel tanky, and missed shots or low missile counts can lead to repeated attempts. The Queen Metroid at the end can also be a serious wall for new players. Veterans who know the layout can save some time in this, like they can beat it around 3.5 to 4 hours, and a 100% run isn't much longer than a normal run. It's about 5.5 hours on average. There's no fast travel, so routing matters a lot, and the good news is that SR388 is more linear than Zebes, so once you know where to go, you lose less time backtracking. It's an ambitious game for the hardware and introduced major ideas for the series, but it just has not aged gracefully as well. If you're revisiting it today, playing with save states helps reduce the frustration of getting lost for the 100th time, so if you're playing like on Switch Online or something, you could definitely finish this game quicker as a first time player. Super Metroid refined everything that came before with better controls, deeper atmosphere, and just a far more detailed world. This is the game most people picture when they hear Metroidvania, and it finally includes an in-game map. It has much more responsive movement, it has a massive interconnected Zebes, but it's far from a quick experience, at least for most people, and that is subjective, whatever you want to consider to be a quick game. Most first-time players finish Super Metroid in around 7.5 to 8 hours, maybe 9 hours. I recently replayed it, and I finished in around 7 hours, since I'm not the best at it if I'm being honest. Even with the map, it's easy to get lost lost or missed upgrades that open new areas. Zebes is significantly larger this time, and the game often nudges you instead of outright telling you where to go. Environmental storytelling like the ruined wrecked ship or the remnants of past experiments encourage exploration, which naturally adds time. However, I did get lost here way less than the previous 2 games in the series. And then once you unlock upgrades like the speed booster, grapple beam, space jump, movement becomes just so much faster and more fluid. Skilled players can even skip entire sections using advanced movement tech. Still, a lot of backtracking is baked into the design. You'll revisit Brinstar, Norfair, and Meridian multiple times, and without a clear idea of what you're missing, it's easy to comb through old rooms for longer than necessary. Boss fights like Kraid and Ridley are iconic without being overly punishing, though Phantoon and Motherbrain can trip up new players. The final escape sequence is also legendary, and I personally didn't find it too difficult, but if someone doesn't know the route well, I could definitely see that adding some time to a playthrough. If you're really good at Super Metroid and you're more experienced, you could definitely finish this in like 5 to 6 hours, maybe a little less. But if you're going for a full completionist playthrough, it's probably going to take you around 9 hours, and that includes collecting every missile tank, energy tank, and super bomb. It's not long by modern standards, but it just feels massive because of how dense and carefully designed everything is. After an 8-year gap, Metroid Fusion took the series in a very different direction. Released on the GBA in 2002, it leans heavily into linear progression. You're stationed on a space facility infected with X-parasites, and the game funnels you through objective to objective using navigation rooms and locked paths. That structure keeps the pace moving, but it does sacrifice player freedom. Now, this is not that long of a game. A first-time run averages just around 5 to 6 hours, while repeat players can beat this in around 3 to 4 hours. Fusion rarely lets you wander aimlessly, but if you miss dialogue or overlook navigation hints, it still can take time to figure out where the game wants you to go. Boss fights are also significantly tougher than earlier entries. Encounters like Nightmare and the SAX demand precision, and mistakes can easily mean retries. Optional missile and energy tank upgrades are tucked away behind clever puzzles or tight platforming. Going over a decent number of those bumps, playtime up to around 6 hours, but a full completionist run can go around from like 7 to 9 hours usually. So overall, this is one of the shortest games in the series, but there are definitely games you could finish a little bit quicker than this. Released on the GameCube in 2002, Prime of course was the jump to 3D first person for the Metroid series. It has a lot of exploration, scanning, and slow deliberate progression, and because of that shift, it's also a much longer game than anything that came before it. For a new player, it's going to take around 14 hours to finish the main story. Big reason for that longer runtime is the scan mechanic like I mentioned. Like nearly everything in the game can be scanned, and the game actively encourages you to do it. Doors are color-coded, enemies have weaknesses you're expected to learn through scanning, and the lore is almost entirely optional but incredibly dense. New players tend to scan constantly, either because they're curious or because they're worried they'll miss something important. That alone can add hours compared to the faster paced 2D entries. Traversal is also slower by design. Talent 4 is broken into large, winding regions like Chozo Ruins, Phendrana Drifts, Magmore Caverns, and the Phazon Mines. There's no fast travel for a long stretch of the game, so progression often means trekking across multiple areas just to reach the one room that accepts your new ability. The first person perspective makes navigation more immersive, but it also makes backtracking feel longer than it actually is. Even with elevators connecting regions, you're still spending a lot of time retracing your steps. Combat's another feature that stretches playtime. Enemies are tougher here, they're more deliberate. Boss fights here be roadblocks on a blind playthrough, especially if you haven't collected enough energy tanks or missile expansions. The final stretch through the Phazon Mines in particular is brutal the first time around, with gauntlets of powered up enemies. If you've played this before and know the general direction and patterns, it'll probably be a couple hours quicker, like maybe 10-11 hours to complete. Hidden rooms are everywhere, often requiring clever use of the scan visor or subtle environmental clues, and a full 100% completionist run typically clocks in around 17.5 to 20 hours, with some people taking as long as 50 plus hours to complete this 100%. That means scanning everything, collecting every upgrade, and fully clearing Talon 4. The artifacts required to access the final area alone can add a few hours if you're not efficient, since they're scattered across the entire planet. Veteran players can optimize this process, but for most people, this is where Metroid Prime became a little bit of a slog. Like this section in my video going over the biggest flaw of every Metroid game, it was this, so if you do know what you're doing, that definitely will save a lot of time. But even despite that length, like Prime rarely feels padded. Like this feels like a perfect playtime for a video game. Like yeah, at the end with the artifact hunt, it does slow it down a little bit, but the pacing here is really great. Metroid Zero Mission is a full remake of the original 86 Metroid, and in many ways it fixes almost every problem that made the NES version so punishing. Released on the GBA in 2004, it modernized the experience with tighter controls, clearer visuals, a full endgame map finally, and much better pacing. As a result, it's one of the fastest feeling Metroid games, even if there's more actual content than the original. A first time playthrough usually takes around 4.5 hours, and the game does a much better job guiding new players without outright holding their hand. Objectives are clearer, rooms are more distinct, and the map makes navigation feel far less frustrating. You still do backtrack, but it's usually intentional rather than accidental. That alone cuts hours off compared to the NES version. And if you want to get more extras, like the playtime can go up to around 5.5 hours. Experienced players can finish this really quick though. Like you can beat this in around 3 hours if you played this before. But now on the other end, if you want to do a completionist run, it's going to take around 8.5 to maybe 9 hours. The game's endgame is far expanded. That is a good amount of content added on. And this is pretty much the main reason why the completion time is a lot higher than you'd expect. Metroid Prime 2 takes everything from the first time and just cranks up the difficulty, complexity, and length. It introduced the dual-world light and dark Aether mechanic, which is the single biggest factor in why this game takes longer than Prime 1 for most players. Usually a first-time playthrough will take around maybe 16.5, 17 hours. Experienced players can probably beat this in around 12 hours. I've only played through this once, and I want to say maybe it took like probably 17 or 18, something like that. And right away, the game is less forgiving. Dark Aether constantly drains your health unless you're standing in safe light zones. That means movement is slower and more cautious. You can't just run through rooms the way you could in Prime 1. Every encounter demands attention, and that alone stretches out exploration time. The navigation's also more complex. Each region exists in both light and dark versions, and you'll constantly be swapping between them to solve puzzles in progress. Early on, it's easy to forget which dimension holds the door or item you need, and that leads to extended backtracking. Even though the maps are technically similar, their layouts diverge just enough to keep you second-guessing yourself if you're not fully locked in. The combat in Echoes is also noticeably tougher. Enemies hit harder, shields more common, you gotta manage light and dark ammo. Boss fights here can be kind of brutal, and a lot of failed attempts here could add an hour or two. But a lot of extras you can get here, and that will probably take you around 19 hours if you want to get a lot of the extras here. Like there's a lot of hidden upgrades, and finding them can be a little demanding. Now for 100%ing the game, it's the highest we've seen in the series so far at 21.5 on average, and that means collecting every upgrade, tackling optional expansions, thoroughly exploring both versions of Aether. At that point, efficiency becomes critical, because if you're just on a leisurely run here, it's gonna take you a lot longer than this. Before I continue, I'm just gonna ask if you're enjoying this video to please subscribe and like the video, as it does help me out. Metroid Prime Pinball is easily the most unusual entry in the series. Released on the DS in 2005, it takes the world, music, and bosses of Metroid Prime and reimagines them as a pinball game, as you'd expect. Yeah, the Morph Ball literally becomes a pinball, and Samus's entire adventure is just condensed into a set of themed tables. It's a fun game, it's surprisingly polished, and obviously it's a lot different than every other Metroid game. For a basic playthrough, the main story can be completed in like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. That usually means clearing all the tables once, beating the bosses, and seeing pretty much everything the game has to offer on a surface level. If you're decent at pinball, this part can go by very quickly. Like, experienced players might be able to save like 15 to 30 minutes total because the game is just so short. However, if you start engaging with the optional content, playtime jumps, like just to get more extras, like it can take around 5 hours, and that accounts for high difficulty modes, bonus objectives, chasing better performance on each table. Like pinball is inherently replay driven, and this is where the game starts asking for more skill. And then a full completionist run can stretch to around 9 hours from what is usually like an hour and a half to a 2-hour game. And if you're asking what that includes, it means maxing out progress across all tables, clearing through the toughest challenges, and you know, that's pretty much it. Because there really isn't too much here. Pinball is very skill based, and if you want to do everything here, it's definitely going to vary how good you are at the game. So you definitely can beat this in under 9 hours for a completionist run, but that's just like an average. Like this game, a lot of people don't even know about it, a lot of people haven't played it, but it's definitely worth a try if you can find a copy for a good price. Like it's nothing crazy, but it's just a fun pinball game. If you like the Metroid theme, I think you'll really enjoy this. Staying on the theme of games that have Metroid Prime in their title and are on the DS, Metroid Prime Hunters is a much more ambitious DS title, released a year later. It was designed with multiplayer in mind and built around the DS strengths and limitations. While it's best remembered for its competitive modes, and there is a full single-player campaign here, and it actually is a little longer and more demanding than people expect, the average player will usually spend around 8 hours finishing the main story. Much of that time comes from learning the game's controls, which rely heavily on the touchscreen for aiming. For some players, that's intuitive. For others, it can take hours to feel comfortable, especially during intense combat sections. Good player might be able to beat this in around 6 hours or so, maybe like 6 or 7 hours. The structure is more fragmented than other Metroid games. You visit multiple planets, solve self-contained puzzles, and revisit areas multiple times to face rival bounty hunters. The repetition adds time, particularly if you're not efficient with navigation or puzzle solving. Boss encounters can also be surprisingly punishing, especially early on. To do everything this game has to offer, it will take around 11 to 12 hours, tracking down every upgrade, logbook entry, and just the optional objectives. This is also where the game's pacing can feel a little uneven, since progression doesn't always flow smoothly as the console Prime games. Now this game is more remembered for its multiplayer, and that's hard to really factor in. Like there's a lot of things you just can't do anymore since the DS servers are just long gone. Like yeah, you could still play local on this, I believe. So that's an entirely different story here. I'm just mostly talking about the main campaign here. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption marked another big evolution for the series. Released on the Wii in 2007, it was designed entirely around motion controls and made major structural changes to how a Metroid game flows. Instead of one massive interconnected world, Corruption spreads its adventure across multiple planets, which has a big impact on both pacing and overall playtime. First playthrough takes around maybe 13 to 14 hours, and a good player can get it down to around 10 or 11 hours. One of the biggest time factors here is navigation. While bouncing between planets sounds like it would speed things up, it actually does the opposite a lot. Like, you're frequently traveling back and forth to revisit worlds with new upgrades, which breaks the flow compared to the tight world design of Prime 1 and 2. Even with the fast travel options, planet hopping adds a lot of pause time and repeated traversal. Combat is more dynamic this time around thanks to motion aiming, which many players find faster and more intuitive than dual stick or touchscreen aiming. I personally don't mind the motion controls of this, I know a lot of people do. However, the game also introduces the phase-on corruption mechanic, where Samus gradually becomes more powerful but also more at risk. Managing that system adds a lot of tension, especially in later fights where mistakes can quickly spiral and just make you have to redo them. Boss encounters can take a lot of time, like some of these can be real roadblocks if you're struggling with their patterns. The game is also more cinematic, and of course with extended story sequences and scripted moments, that can contribute to its runtime. Wants to tell a bigger, more in-your-face story than previous Prime entries, and that does come at the cost of speed. Now for a 100% run, that can take around 18 hours on average. That includes cleanups across every planet, tackling optional objectives, and fully mastering the corruption system in late game combat. Now if you're like a veteran player, you'll know where to go, you'll be overall just better at the game, and that could definitely cut some time out. So this is one of the longer Metroid games, similar to Prime 2 in length. Metroid Other M is one of the most divisive games in the series, and I don't think it's particularly close. Released in 2010 for the Wii, it attempts to blend classic 2D Metroid gameplay with a more cinematic, story-heavy presentation. The result is just a game that feels unusually constrained, both in how it plays and how long it takes to finish. A new player is going to take around 9 to 10 hours completing the main story, and a returning player, if those exist, can complete it around 2 hours quicker. Structurally, the game is fairly linear with clear objectives and limited exploration. However, that doesn't translate to fast progress. Frequent cutscenes, forced slow walk story moments, and restrictive upgrade authorization rules all contribute to drawing things out. Combat can both be flashy and frustrating. The melee system is heavily emphasized, and while it looks impressive, encounters can become repetitive real quick. Boss fights are often cinematic, but they just rely on specific gimmicks and perspective shifts that can just cause repeated attempts if you miss a cue or just mess something up here. Now, if you have the urge to do everything this game has to offer and do a completionist run, that's going to take about 13 hours. That means uncovering every collectible, revisiting multiple areas with late game upgrades. Navigation can feel awkward here due to fixed camera angles, which just makes precise movement and item hunting slower than it should be. I can't imagine too many people played this game and then decided it would be worth it to 100%, but I'm sure there's gotta be some people here who did, so let me know your experience with that in the comments. So Other M isn't long compared to the Prime entries, but it often feels longer than its actual runtime. The heavy narrative focus combined with restrictive design choices just slows the pace in a way that just frustrates fans of the series. Whether you love or hate this game, it's just a strange chapter in Metroid's history, and I guess we can just be glad this game isn't too long, so even if you want to say you've played every Metroid game and don't like this, you could beat this in under 9 hours, so that isn't too bad. So after Other M, there was 6 years without a Metroid game, and what we got was not much better, and in my opinion it was worse. We got Metroid Prime Federation Force, and it completely changed the series structure once again. It was a mission-based co-op shooter game focused on Galactic Federation soldiers instead of Samus. For a first-time player, finishing the main campaign usually takes around 10.5 hours. The game is broken up into short, objective-driven missions rather than just one continuous world. While that sounds faster on paper, it often ends up doing the opposite. Missions can drag if you fail objectives, struggle with bosses, or just need to retry sessions due to the difficulty spikes. A grizzled veteran of this game, which I don't know how many exist, can probably beat this game in around 8.5 to 9 hours, maybe a little less. Knowing which upgrades to prioritize and when to push objectives instead of hunting medals helps smooth out the pacing. That said, the game still feels slower than most Metroid titles because progress is tied to mission completion rather than organic exploration. And then a full completionist run typically lands around 18 hours, and that includes replaying missions to earn medals, clearing all optional objectives, unlocking upgrades, and finishing every challenge. Because completion requires revisiting content repeatedly under specific conditions, the time investment adds up quickly. Like, this is not a game that most people even finish, so I've never come close to 100%ing this game, and I honestly don't ever plan to, but if you did, good on you. Metroid Samus Returns is a full modern remake of Metroid II, and this is actually the game that got me into the series. Metroid Samus Returns is a full modern remake of Metroid 2, rebuilt from the ground up with new mechanics, smoother controls, and a far heavier emphasis on combat. This was the game that got me into the Metroid series. I got this on my 3DS in 2017 when it came out, and it turned SR388 into a much denser and more demanding experience than the original Game Boy version. First time playthrough takes around 11 hours, while the core objective is still hunting down Metroids. Each encounter is now a proper boss fight instead of just like a brief skirmish. The melee counter system adds depth, but also slow things down when you're still learning enemy patterns and timing. Exploration is smoother thanks to the detailed map, but the expanded environments mean more rooms, more secrets, and more deliberate pacing. An experienced player can usually finish the game in about 9.5 to 10 hours, so not too much quicker. Familiarity with enemy behavior, counter timing, and efficient route selection just make all the difference here. You still can't really rush through everything, but combat becomes far more controlled, and backtracking is more intentional rather than just random exploration. To 100% this, it's going to take around 15 hours on average. It's what you'd expect. It's collecting every missile expansion, energy tank, upgrades, and tackling optional encounters requires revisiting large sections of SR388 with late game abilities. Post-game content and secret challenges also add time, especially if you're aiming for clean clears instead of brute forcing encounters. And I don't want to have a whole section for this, but I know a lot of people probably want me to talk about E.M.M.I, another Metroid 2 remake. I've personally never finished the game myself, but from what I see, it's going to take around like 7 to 8 hours. Metroid Dread is the most modern 2D mainline Metroid and one of the fastest feeling entries in the series, even if the actual playtime doesn't suggest a short game. Released in 2021, it's built around fluid movement, tight combat, and constant forward momentum. First playthrough is going to take around 9 hours, which is surprisingly short. The world of ZDR is designed to nudge players forward subtly, often locking off old routes and opening new ones as you get new abilities. This reduces aimless wandering, but difficulty compensates for it. Boss fights are frequent and demanding, and first-time players will almost certainly need multiple attempts. The E.M.M.I zones play a major role in pacing. These are like stealth heavy sections, and there's going to be a lot of trial and error, memorization here, precise movement. Early encounters especially can slow things down as you learn escape routes and timing, with repeated deaths adding to the overall runtime. An experienced player can usually finish Dread in around 6.5 to 7.5 hours, because once you know the basic patterns, E.M.M.I layouts, optimal routes, game flows extremely quickly. Samus's movement is incredibly efficient here, and Zero's design is just very rewarding. And if you are going to 100% this game, like there's going to be a lot of late game stuff here. You're going to need to know advanced movement techniques and just be very precise, because even knowing where everything is doesn't guarantee success, because many collectibles do require near perfect inputs. Dread's a really great game. Like, it is a short game, especially for like a modern Metroidvania where you have a lot of games that take like 30 plus hours, but for Metroid Dread to just be this great of a game and not drag on at all and not necessarily feel like too short of a game, even though you could probably beat it in 9 hours on your first try, like it's a very impressive game. And now we're at the newest game in the series that literally just released 2 days ago at the time of writing. The data here from my research may change since there's very few people who have actually 100% of this so far, and probably most people in general haven't finished the main campaign. The average playtime of now is 12 hours for the main campaign, and the average completionist time is 15 hours. It's not really a time I could give for experienced players since there's not really any yet for this game, but I'd imagine maybe like 2 hours faster. I've not played this yet, unlike the other games on this list, so I can't talk from personal experience. As of the time I'm recording this, I'm actually picking it up tomorrow, so I'm really looking forward to it. It seems to be one of the shorter Metroid Prime games, and I don't necessarily hate it as long as the experience is really good. Like, a lot of people just want super long games, and personally I don't need that. Like, I'm good with a game that's just great the whole way through and doesn't feel like it drags. Alright, so now that I've went through every Metroid game and how long it takes to beat, let's see how long it would take to play through all the Metroid games. So for an average first time playthrough, like, you're gonna get lost, you're gonna miss a lot of extras, and that's probably gonna end up costing you more time because you won't be as upgraded and you'll have to redo a lot of things, and overall you'll just be figuring things out. It's gonna take around 133 to 135 hours, so that's over 5.5 full days just full of Metroid. So this could vary a lot because maybe in your first playthrough you try to get more extras, maybe you're just better at Metroid games, so this is just an average, or rather a range. So now for more experienced players where they've already played the game, they know what to do, they're going to be better at it, and it could take around maybe like 105 to 115 hours. It can really depend a lot, but most likely like it's going to add up, so you're probably going to save 20 to 30 hours overall. And now for completionist runs, like this is the big one. This is doing every single thing you could ever do in the entire Metroid series. So this could range a lot. Like, some of the averages I gave don't even scratch the surface of how long it takes some people to complete these games. Like, some of them are over 50 hours. So for some people this might be hundreds of hours, but from the numbers I got, it could take around 190 hours to 200 hours. So that's around 8 full days of Metroid, so over a week where you're just playing Metroid non-stop. And once again, let me reiterate that this is just a range. It's just research I did as well as personal experience. Everyone's experience is going to be different. Like, there's people who probably aren't even trying to speedrun who could beat games way quicker than the average person. There's going to be people who are just going to be way slower. So just remember that the exceptions here do not invalidate it. Also, once again, I'm not talking about speedrunners. Like, speedrunners are insane at these games, especially Metroid. Like, there's a lot of very dedicated Metroid speedrunning communities, and I'm not a part of that, so I can't really speak for how long it takes them to speedrun. If any of you are or have experience, I'd love to hear how long it would take to beat these games, because I honestly have no idea. But if you made it to the end of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. I have a couple other Metroid videos. I have one ranking every Metroid game without Prime 4 since that wasn't out yet, and I have a video going over the biggest flaw in every Metroid game. So definitely check those out, and also consider joining my Discord if you want to talk more about Metroid or other Nintendo games, or give me some video ideas. Link is in the description. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.